And so I ran in 86, and Senator Porter ran in 86. And I had to quit my job as a sex crimes prosecutor. And what I did every day of my life, every day during the daytime, my campaign headquarters was down on at the corner of 23rd and Kelly. Okay, you know where the governor's mansion is, and then that's that oil compact, interstate oil compacts building. And then there was this little rickety, it's not that nice Conoco that's there now, there was this little rickety abandoned gas station. And it was an old-timey car wash because it was long, where you drove, well, I guess it wasn't old-timey. If you was going to drive through it, it had to be long. But anyway, long old car wash. And so we found out who owned that property, and we rented it for that summer. And we got in there and painted and cleaned those windows up and put Vicki Miles-LaGrange all on the windows. My dad being an industrial arts teacher, he was retired by then, but he was loving it because he was into his old groove, you know. And my mother and her best friend, a lady named Cam Bird, they were the campaign managers, and my mom was this retired kindergarten teacher. Well, actually, she retired from State Department of Education, but she's still like a kindergarten teacher even at 87. You know, she's this kindergarten teacher. Everybody has their assignment, and you have to sit here until yours is done. That's the way she treated people who came to the headquarters. And we said, "Mama, these people are volunteers," and she was like, "How long do you have?" And when they would tell her, she'd say, "Now, for the next hour, this is what we need you to do." And she was great. She and her friend, they were great. I had no money. I had no organization. And I really didn't have that much name recognition. I mean, my parents, Miles, they had been, you know, if you grew up in segregated Oklahoma City, when the schools were segregated, everybody, my dad had taught everybody that went through Douglas High School, and if you were black, you'd gone through Douglas. And then during the integration, they sent my dad retired as an assistant principal, they would send, you know, he's kind of a disciplinarian sort, and they would send him, he had been at just about every school in the city, Northwest Class and Capitol Hill, U.S. Grant. So people knew my dad, knew our family name, you know, that way. But they didn't know me from Adam, you know. And it was amazing. The whole thing was amazing. How I followed this little book. I followed a lot of advice from Anna Atkins. one of my first political teachers, Mr. Albert. I'll let him remain anonymous in all of this. But I had seen enough. I had seen enough. Just, you know, the opportunity to observe people who did very well what I was trying to do by, you know, running for office, and that was, you know, to serve in the legislative body and representing constituents. And it was amazing. The best, can I tell you one story about the race? There was a book. I'm always a person I miss how to. At any given time, I'm probably taking some class at some library or some Votech or something on how to do something. And so this book was commended to me. I don't even know who originally told me about it. The old Women's Education Fund. There was a group in the 60s, late 60s, called the Women's Education Fund. And they were out of Washington, D.C., and their objective was to get women elected to public office. And they had this book, and I have this book, and it is so funny now, looking at this book, but it's so basic. It's called the Campaign Workbook. And it has from A to Z how to run and how to win office as a woman. And it starts with very simplistic things like, you know, putting your life out there on a piece of paper and seeing where your little soft spots are and how you're going to respond to certain things and who's your support group going to be and what are you going to be when everybody's talking about you, from the 6 o'clock news to the newspaper to whatever, and are you strong enough to deal with this, or are you going to fall apart? Are the people around you going to fall apart? How do you raise money? How do you get out the vote? I mean, it was an A to Z. It was like a primer on how to, if you're a woman, run for office. There was a chapter on incumbency, running against an incumbent, which I was running against a 22-year incumbent. Well, and I mean, I read that book from beginning to end, and one of the chapters in this book was about targeting and how before you even, sign up to do this deal, you need to do your targeting research. And what your targeting research is going to do is when you do it, and basically you're looking at, it didn't work so well for a Senate race because it was every 4 years, so that's a longer period of time. Works real well for a House race, which are 2-year terms. Mm-hmm. And so let's say you look at the election returns for that candidate that you're running against for 2 races. 8 years is almost too much because the demographics can change so much in an area over an 8-year period. So I did Senator Porter's. Actually, I just did the term, his last voting, just 4 years before 86, so that would have been, what, 82. It was hard then because stuff wasn't computerized, and I had to go to the county election board, and they would let you buy Xerox, the precinct books. They were available for public view, but you had to stand there and Xerox them. God, I had to do that for 32 precincts. And so that was a lot of Xerox. And now they can probably just send it to you by email or whatever for a cost. And it was a cost then. So your targeting research is you're just really, and they gave you this little formula thing to use, and you were just really almost, by the time you did your targeting research, you had a snapshot of every precinct. Who supported him, who supported the other people, who didn't vote. You had everything you needed. Mm-hmm. And then you were supposed to look, the targeting research, once it was done for the total number of precincts, you were supposed to look at where his strengths were. And you were supposed to identify as many strengths as you had in your opponent's strong areas. And you were going to play to those strengths in those areas. But you weren't going to spend the goal of it, you didn't have enough time, money, people resources to spend in every precinct. So this targeting research tells you how to spend your limited resources. So what I found from my targeting research was that as a result of my targeting research, there were 32 precincts. And for nearly 22 years, Senator Porter had won from only 11 of 32 precincts. That's what my targeting research following this book told me. So then I zoomed in on those 11 precincts. Well, what was his number one vote-getting precinct? Garden Oaks. That's where I had gone to elementary school. That's where my mother had taught kindergarten for, 40-some-odd years. Bing, the lights went off. You don't have the same money, people, time as your opponent does, your incumbent opponent. So use resources, unconventional resources. I said, Mama, if before this race is over, you will knock on every door in Garden Oaks. Because what person doesn't love their kid's kindergarten teacher? Everybody loves the kindergarten teacher. Oh, God, it took her the whole 4 months. I said, Mama, you got to stop going in these people's houses. Don't get off the porch. Oh, Mrs. Miles, come in. Oh, God. Oh, they wanted to tell the story where all the kids were. Oh, little Bobby, well, he didn't make it. He's in prison. But Judy did good, She had to hear everybody's story, but it paid off. I knew the second vote-getting precinct was the area which is now the Health Sciences Center. At that time, those were thriving communities. His second top vote-getting precinct was that JFK area where John F. Kennedy Junior High School was over Martin Luther King. It is there now. The building is there, falling apart. But it's now Moon, and the old Moon is, I guess that's something for the medical complex. Well, my dad was the assistant principal at Moon Junior High School, and he had taught there for years because he had taught at Douglas for 100 years, and then he moved to Moon. So I knew that my dad, people that were voters in that area, you know, had a sense of my dad, who he was, you know, because he loved his kids, and he taught all, you know, usually all boys in industrial arts. So I said, Dad, I didn't get him to knock on doors. He's not the knocking on door type. But anyway, so I knew, and what the research, what the campaign workbook told me was that, you know, you just play to your strengths in any of those areas, because as much as you can break up your opponent's stronghold, the better. And then what you do with the lion's share of your people, of your money, and of your time is you hit those. For me, it was 22 other precincts, and that's where I directed my money and resources. I took whoever put a yard sign up for me, I took it, you know, but I really concentrated on those areas. And it worked. It worked. I mean, election night, everybody, you know, everybody's up there at the headquarters waiting for those returns, and they said, God, Vicki, you seem so calm. And I said, and they said, aren't you nervous? And I said, no, not yet. I said, I'm just waiting for some precincts to come in. And they said, what are you waiting for? And I said, well, I'm waiting for Garden Oaks to come in, because I knew if I could impact his #1 vote-getting precinct for 22 years, I had a pretty good feeling that I had a good chance of winning. And so, sure enough, when Garden Oaks came in, his margin was like less than 30% that he beat me in that precinct, and I was ecstatic. And so as they came in as I probably thought they were going to come in from that, because that was, you know, it was downhill from there. But that story with my mom is so funny. She was so funny. She was so... Oh, she and her friend Cam Bird. And Cam Bird retired from Oklahoma City Board of Education, and she was the ESL, English as Second Language, whatever the coordinator of that effort was for the board. And they were so funny. I mean, they were out there just organizing their butts off. And it all inured to my benefit. And everybody said, God, how did you do it? And I said, ask Mama, and I call her Ma Bird. I said, Mama and Ma Bird. And I was just the beneficiary. The other thing I did, it was a very grassroots campaign. And if you know, and that's what all that kind of literature says, if the area in which you're running is small enough to do that door-to-door, you know, campaigns are not won in offices. They are not won sending out literature. They're won pressing the flesh and looking people in the eye and answering questions, even though they might be humiliating.